Like Godard himself, viewers who have been weaned on French literature know that every work of stature somewhere tends to go mad. It abandons its path of reason, science, intellect, and intelligence in haphazarding into rich and dubious areas where within even the strictest controls of logic and grammar, unconscious forces emanate from worlds unknown. Rest in peace, or rest in oblivion, Jean-Luc Godard. He wasn't the most sentimental man. In some ways, he perhaps was too sentimental. There's no question that Jean-Luc Godard is the greatest filmmaker of the 20th century. He was the most radical filmmaker, and it's not just that he kickstarted the French New Wave and was the leading figure of the French New Wave. There wouldn't have been an American New Wave of cinema. All those great films of the late 60s, 1970s, leading into the very early 80s, that was all in the wake of what Jean-Luc Godard had done in the early 60s. And he influenced all those filmmakers, the film school generation. Jean-Luc Godard was the top dog. He was the alpha that inspired all of those directors that came out of the film school generation. We wouldn't have had Paul Schrader, Brian De Palma, Martin Scorsese, even Spielberg and George Lucas. All these guys were greatly influenced by Jean-Luc Godard. So recognize. I don't want this to be an academic video. I want this to be a personal video because his films, his movies, his motion pictures, his art inspired me greatly and actually literally changed my life. My life was changed by his films. Like, that's a hackneyed thing to say, and a lot of people say it, but not everyone always literally means it. And I'm not one of these cats that uses the word literally loosely. Like, my life actually changed because of Jean-Luc Godard. And it's even connected to this poster behind me, this Pro Le Fou poster. If you look at the date there, it says 2009, very important year in my life. I broke into the film business with this very big sale and spec script. To track back a couple years before that, I dropped out of community college and I liked movies, but I wasn't a cinephile. I was mainly a music guy and I liked books. You know, I loved F. Scott Fitzgerald and Norman Mailer, I was a huge fan of, and Bret Easton Ellis, and I was more of a book guy. Books and music. That's what I was about, books and music. Got on a martial arts film kick, the late 80s, early 90s. This was a great period for Hong Kong cinema. I was very into Jackie Chan and Jet Li, and one of my favorite movies was a movie called Swordsman 2, which starred Jet Li and Bridget Lin. At the same time, I was also into Quentin Tarantino. So he had this video collection. It was called Rolling Thunder, Quentin Tarantino's Rolling Thunder video collection. And it had Chungking Express, Wong Kar-wai's Chungking Express. I think I rented it from a video store. I liked the first part when Bridget Lin was like shooting people and stuff, but the second half of Fei Wong, when it became kind of a romantic comedy and all the repetition and the repetition of soundtrack cues, there was just a lot of things about it I wasn't used to and I couldn't get into, and I thought, oh, this is pretentious, I don't like this. Well, thing is, it got into my brain. Like, I started thinking about it a lot. And not just the cool scenes when Bridget Lin was shooting people, but some of those later scenes with Fei Wong and dancing around the kitchen to the Mama and Papa song, you know, California Dreamin'. And I just was thinking about it, and certain shots I was thinking of, and the music. And I found that there was something about this film that had really kind of touched my soul. And I was like, maybe I don't hate this movie. Maybe I love it. I just want, fuck it, I'm going to buy it. So I went to Amazon. This is like the early days of Amazon. And I bought a VHS copy, a Rolling Thunder VHS copy. I wish I still had it, but I don't, unfortunately. This film, I got the Criterion Collection version. There you go. I wish I had that original Rolling Thunder VHS. I'll have a picture of it up there. So I had it, and in it, Tarantino talked where he explains that Jean-Luc Godard was a big influence on Chungking Express and on his own films. And he mentioned that Anna Karina's character in My Life to Live inspired Uma Thurman's character in Pulp Fiction. So he kind of broke it down for me. So QT, thanks a lot QT, he broke it down for me. I didn't go to film school. I dropped out of community college. All I knew is I liked Tarantino. I had grown to love Chungking Express. which apparently had a very Godardian style to it. Because of Chungking Express, my mind was suddenly open to a different kind of filmmaking and sensibility that it took me like 2 times to fully appreciate. It's like acquiring a taste, like drinking scotch. You might not like it the first time. It tastes like drinking out of an old man's shoe the first time you drink scotch, but by the 3rd time, maybe the 4th, it's like nectar of the gods. Sometimes art's like that as well. So I was really into Wong Kar-wai. I started getting all his films. And while I was doing that, I thought, okay, let me try out this Jean-Luc Godard guy. So I got the film that everyone cites. I got Breathless, his very first film from 1960. I wish I had that original DVD copy I bought. It was a Fox Lorber. Is that how you say it? Lorber? Fox Lorber copy. It got lost in my most recent move, but it's all right because I needed to upgrade it anyway. I didn't have the Criterion Collection version. So, in tribute to Jean-Luc Godard, I just purchased it on Amazon, so it'll be coming tomorrow. Tomorrow we'll finally have the Criterion Collection Blu-ray of Breathless. So I got Breathless, and Breathless blew me away. I loved it. Breathless, I immediately loved it and thought, yeah, that's great. Then I got this film next, and it was this copy. This might have been my first Criterion Collection. It was either this or perhaps a Kurosawa film, maybe The Hidden Fortress or Yojimbo. It was because I was also getting into that. So essentially, this was a period, was essentially my own film school. I was in my mid-20s, and I was teaching myself these films. Well, in people like Tarantino. I mean, are you going to get a better teacher than that? Tarantino coming in and telling you, hey, bozo, watch this movie. And so it was very organic, It wasn't academic. It was just these were cool films. It's the same way I always got into music when I would find out about the influence. You track the influence. All art's like that. And that's the great thing about it is, if you're really passionate about it, you track the influence. But, Godard, his early 60s films, his early to late 60s films, his 60s films, let's just say that, they were the find of the century for me. Band of Outsiders, I loved. I saw an even greater influence on Pulp Fiction from this film than on Breathless. That was it. After that, I had to get all of his films. A Woman is a Woman, great musical, really funny. My Life to Live, one of my favorites. God, what a great film. Also a very big influence on Wong Kar-wai and Quentin Tarantino. Let me just say something about Anna Karina. Anna Karina was Godard's muse. A lot of these filmmakers, they fall in love with a woman, an actress, and she becomes their wife and muse. And that's what happened with Godard and Anna Karina. And it was a very passionate and important relationship in his life. And it was a great collaboration. It was actually a creative collaboration. Anna Karina was an amazing actress and presence, very raw. He just saw her. She was a model doing TV commercials, a Danish/French model. He was taken by her. Who wouldn't be? I mean, she's beautiful. Their love affair results in this film, My Life to Live and A Woman is a Woman, where you see kind of the two sides. Anna Karina's the fun musical side, and Godard's the dark, existential, broody side. And that contrast was something that affected his films for the next couple of years, leading to, I think, his masterpiece, Pro Le Fou, which was in the wake of the divorce. But even then, kind of like Fleetwood Mac, Stevie Nicks and Lindsey Buckingham, even the divorce led to one of their greatest artistic achievements. And Anna Karina sadly passed away a couple years ago as well, as did Jean-Paul Belmondo, who was the star of Breathless and Pro Le Fou, and essentially a stand-in for Godard in the films, in my opinion. It was an amazing collaboration, and I do think his best films are from this period. Even whether or not Anna Karina's in it, like with this film, Contempt, where it's essentially Brigitte Bardot in the Anna Karina role. I'm sure that led to a fight. But anyway, amazing movie. One of his greatest movies. This is probably one of his more accessible films, too, that I would suggest to people just getting into Godard. One of the most beautiful films ever made. Beautiful shots of Capri. It's an amazing film. It's the first evidence of cracks in this marriage. Even though they hadn't been married too long, there was already some problems, obviously. Contempt is about a marriage falling apart. And it's one of the greatest films of all time, one of the greatest scores, and I love that. And then he did Band of Outsiders after that film. This is one thing he was doing that I really dug. Back to back, he would do widescreen, lush, beautiful movies that were bright and colorful, and then he would always follow it up with back to basics, gritty, black and white, done closer to the Breathless style. And that's what Band of Outsiders was. It was just hey, after Contempt, which was his biggest production yet, Band of Outsiders showing that he could still be legit. Godard is showing you that there's many different ways to create a cinematic experience. Married Woman. There you go. There's an old Fox Lorber one for you. Alphaville. This is definitely one of my first Criterion collections. This is very old. Look at this one. These original Criterion collections only have like the trailer and like color bars. I don't even get the color bars, but they got color bars. That's a feature. And this is an amazing film. Alphaville, very big influence on Blade Runner. So if you're a fan of Blade Runner, you should check this out. This was actually the first film noir sci-fi film. That's right, I can't think of one before. If there is, tell me in the comments section. But this is an amazing film. This was his take on sci-fi. A lot of Godard films were like his take on a genre. Like, this is my take on a heist film. That's my take on sci-fi. This is my take on like a romance. My take on a musical. My take on a kitchen sink drama. Masculine Feminine, another great film. Made in the USA. This was his take on a detective film, but it's like a radical Marxist detective film. 2 or 3 things I know about her. An amazing film, which is kind of a transition film. Kind of film that kind of ends the last wave of films, but also foreshadows his more essay style that he would carry on with Weekend and others. Yeah, I'm not a huge fan of Weekend. A little too academic for me. And I feel starting with Weekend, his films start getting too cold for me. They're a little too cold. They're a little too militant. They're a little too academic, and I feel like they're like kind of what people might think Godard films are like that haven't seen them. I could appreciate them, but I'm not a big fan from that period. I'm more about those earlier films and some of those transition films. To me, the greatest Godard film, and yeah, this one I upgraded to the Blu-ray. I had to have the Blu-ray for this one, Criterion Collection Blu-ray. It's beautiful. Pour le Feu. Pour le Feu is my favorite Jean-Luc Godard film, and it's really a film that changed my life. Like I said, like all these films to a degree, Breathless, Band of Outsiders, My Life to Live, Contempt, Alphaville, they all contributed to most influential and inspirational and meaningful creative awakening in my life that just changed my whole life. Pour le Feu, made the same year as Alphaville. 2 films in 1 year. That's how these artists did it back then. He did 2 films, Alphaville, 2 films that are 2 of the greatest films ever made. And Pour le Feu. And Pour le Feu, by this point, his marriage with Anna Karina had sadly ended, and he was clearly heartbroken. I mean, just look at this cover. Kind of says it all. Moi j'ai une toute petite ligne de chance. Moi j'ai une toute like the greatest Our Marriage Is Over movie ever made. This is really the heart. This is the most Godardian of all Godard films because this is where the 2 phases of his filmmaking, it's a total hybrid. It's right there. It's the Rosetta Stone for all the films he had done before and all the films he would do later. This is where he first starts introducing the essay elements, cutting to text and a lot of those things that he would do even more so in later films. Inject a little bit of leftist politics into the film, but there was still a lot of humor. There was still some love of cinema and a lot of personal stuff with his relationship with Anna Karina. It's a very personal film. It's a man and a woman going on the run. When I finally got to Pour le Feu, that was it. I was like, whoa, this is the greatest film I've ever seen. This is his greatest film. Pour le Feu is the greatest film ever made, in my opinion. It's the White Album of cinema. Everything you could do in a movie. Everything you can do in a movie in 110 minutes. 110 minutes. Even a perfect length for a movie. 110 minutes. Boom. It's like a perfect screenplay is 110. It's a perfect movie. As the poster says, an explosion of color, sound, music, passion, violence, and wit. Yeah, I think that sums it up. It's psychedelic. It's 1965, and Godard is getting more psychedelic than the Beatles are yet. This is before Revolver, before Tomorrow Never Knows. This is before that wave of wonderful psychedelic albums in 1967. This is before all that. Godard's getting psychedelic here in 1965. It's an explosion of color, images, you see paintings, jump shots, and the whole way that the film is put together could only be done in the middle, the heart of the 60s. And Godard really was leading everyone. He was leading everyone. Back in 1960, Breathless. He was like a man from the future, tragically a few years from the future. So he's just always a little out of step with everyone. I also got this book. This is a great book, simply all about Pour le Feu. And yeah, I'm a pretty big fan. So Pour le Feu was probably the biggest influence on my script I wrote, Fred Seaton, Pierre. When people read it, they usually go Breathless if they know the Godard. And there definitely were some shout outs to Breathless throughout that script. But I was definitely thinking more pro Le Fou than anything else. And we ended up selling that script for I was washing dishes. I was literally washing dishes in New Jersey when I sold that script. No film school, except for the film school that was my own personal film school. That inspired that script. I went from being a dishwasher to suddenly a guy who had like a 7-figure screenplay deal. It totally changed my life. My manager at the time, my first manager and agent, called me up and said, "This is life-changing money." And it was literally life-changing money. Within a few months, because I always wanted to live in Manhattan with a lot of money. So I was renting a brownstone off of Park Avenue in Murray Hill. And during that period, Pro Le Fou was playing at the New York Film Forum. It was a new restored version of it. And that's where that poster's from. 2009, I just sold a script. I just moved to New York. So when I went to see Pro Le Fou at the Film Forum, first time seeing it on a big screen, it was perfect. Everything was perfect. It was a perfect time period where dreams that I couldn't have even imagined were coming true. And I bought that poster. This poster right here, right behind me. And this poster, since then, has hung on the wall of many places I've lived. I've lived in Manhattan. I lived in Beverly Hills, in Lambertville, Jersey. I lived in Sherman Oaks, and now it's in Tampa, Florida. It's always going to be with me. It means a lot to me. It signifies everything to me, like my life. It's the way that it blew my mind when I saw this movie. It taught me, and Godard on a whole taught me this, that there's limitless possibilities. Limitless possibilities to art and to life. And we can create any kind of life that we want to create for ourselves. We don't have to stay in a box. We can break free from our mindset where people just repeat things a lot. They just imitate. But people are scared to kind of break free from what they're used to, what's not challenging, what's comforting. And Godard taught me to just go for it. Just go for it. Just write whatever you want to write. Dare to live a life less ordinary. I did that, and I have lived a more interesting life. A lot of things in my life I never would have had without Jean-Luc Godard and his films. To me, I think people have this idea, Godard, that it's like pretentious. I think people misuse the word pretentious too much. Pretentious is pretense, like if someone's not really intelligent or not really creating amazing, innovative, artistic art, but has the attitude like the art. It's like a front, it's fake. Where there's nothing fake about Godard. He was entirely authentic. In fact, he was probably the most authentic filmmaker there ever was, to the point where he alienated himself many times from many people. I do think the idea that people have when they think of, like, people that don't know his films or have this idea of what they think a French filmmaker is like, they're thinking of Jean-Luc Godard. In fact, when people think of a Frenchman, especially in America, when we think of a Frenchman, they think of Jean-Luc Godard. They think of a guy with sunglasses, smoking a cigarette, he's got kind of a surly attitude, he's intellectual, and also loves Jerry Lewis. That's right, the whole French love Jerry Lewis thing, that comes from Jean-Luc Godard. Actually, Godard inspired me to watch Jerry Lewis films, and I love them. They're great films. I instantly saw how they were great, and I understood how they influenced Godard. Like, that's the thing. Godard was not a pretentious man. He was actually, he hated that. He hated pretentiousness. He wanted to knock that all down. That's why he wanted to change about French cinema, which he thought got too regulated. And it was all about these sacred cows and rules, and you had to follow this rule, and you had to shoot scenes like this, and you had to shoot scenes like that. He was not a snob. He loved high art, he loved low art, he saw the value in Jerry Lewis films. His influence was so impactful. His movies, all the film school generation, all those guys, told you Spielberg, Lucas, Scorsese, De Palma, Schrader, all those guys. All those guys were blown away by Godard. They took a cue from Godard. They probably even opened themselves up to Jerry Lewis because of Jean-Luc Godard. Godard changed everything, and it changed art. Really, from Star Wars to Pulp Fiction, it all kind of comes from Godard. He is the most important filmmaker of the 20th century. There's just a fire to it. It's like it's frozen in time, the fire. It's there. It's still vibrant. Like, you watch it and you feel like you're watching a movie where it's like the most important moment in time is happening right there in front of your eyes. And his vision was expanding. At a certain point, it expanded so much. It was like that famous tracking shot in Weekend. I think that ultimately was a creative dead end, unfortunately. But, others will disagree. A lot of people love that movie. He kind of reclaimed himself towards the end, actually. And this is one thing, and I want to end with this. One of my favorite cinematic experiences was actually seeing a film he did just a couple of years ago. The man was in his 80s, and it was 2014's Goodbye to Language. Goodbye to Language. Amazing film. In fact, I would say that, that's my favorite Godard film after Two or Three Things I Know About Her. Easily my favorite film after that one. It's 3D. It's in 3D. Most people don't do like artistic films, art house films in 3D. Godard, leave it to Godard to do it. He does this art house film in 3D. It was so relevant and so fresh, and it was so 2014 in the way Pro Le Fou was so 1965. But at the same time, you could flip them. Goodbye to Language, you could show it to people in 1965 and they would have connected with it, even if they wouldn't have understood the smartphones. And Pro Le Fou, like today, that could be this world today. A romantic story about a guy getting involved with a leftist militant today who wants to bring down Western society. That could be made today. So Goodbye to Language was a great cinematic experience. I love seeing that on the big screen. I love Roxy, Godard's dog, his own dog, in the same way he had put his own wife in movies. Well, leave it to Godard to put a dog into a movie. And Roxy was kind of the perfect muse for Godard at the end. This great dog he finds kinship with nature and art and culture, all this stuff that was created in the 20th century and 21st century. And that's why I think Godard wasn't just the greatest filmmaker of the 20th century, he's the greatest filmmaker of the 21st century, because these films are still relevant, kinetic, and alive, and they still matter today. One of the greatest films of all time. I'm going to enjoy watching my Breathless Criterion Collection that's coming tomorrow. There you go. That's it. This is my video about Jean-Luc Godard and how his films changed my life, but they also changed cinema and art and culture as we know it. Good job, Jean-Luc Godard.